So, I watched the new Weeknd movie, The Singer, not Saturday and Sunday, and I'm excited to talk about it. I had no clue what I was in for, but that was something.
Death is nothing at all. It does not kill.
What's going on, folks? Trey Edward Shults is our director here. He directed Waves, one of the more beautiful films of that year. It Comes at Night, which was semi-divisive, but I think it did the job it needed to do. And I saw this trailer not knowing it was a movie about The Weeknd, like a very personal story to him that coincides with the release of his album. Yeah, it's that kind of movie. So I had no clue what it was when I first saw the trailer. But I saw it, and Trey Edward Shults' name popped up. I saw some of the cast members. I'm like, okay, that looks interesting. I think visually looks really cool. Don't know what the movie is, but it looked like it could be a fever dream of sorts. And that's honestly what I'm going to stick with while talking about the movie itself, a fever dream. Now, I want to start out by saying this. Look, I like The Weeknd and his music. I don't know much more about him beyond that. I know there are hardcore fans, and then there are hardcore fans. I'm not saying this works. It's a lot of inside baseball within the confines of his life. It's a story about how a singer, The Weeknd, loses his voice and some crazy things happen to him after that. We'll get into it. You got Jenna Ortega, you got Barry Keoghan, you've got a really good look and feel. The style as a whole is the big winner here. Trey Edward Shults is that director. Now, if it wouldn't have had any of that, then I would have said, yeah, this is an epic disaster, but it looks good. Visually spectacular. And you have a storyline, how do I put this, that could have been done in 20 minutes, stretched out over the span of an hour 45, but it's one that does seem very personal to The Weeknd. I know he has a name. I'm going to refer to him as The Weeknd because that's kind of what we're going off of here. But there's also some unintentional comedy in this film. So even if you're not enjoying yourself, you may get a kick out of some things that Jenna Ortega is doing. There is a sequence or a series of scenes where she's just dancing to The Weeknd's music. I know this is really depressing, but I love the beat. And it's one of those movies that I know hardcore fans, they are going to get a kick out of it because they know his story. They know how personal this is to him. But anyone outside of that bubble, and many people who can even appreciate the artistic aspect of this film, which I do. I think the movie looks good. But when it comes to telling a cohesive story, and one that should not have taken an hour 45 to tell, and does come across like a fever dream, but a fever dream that leans more into the fever than it does the dream. You associate dreams with good things. Well, this one may. What, is it a nightmare? I think the way to watch this and potentially appreciate it is if you're in a movie theater full of hardcore fans of his music and his story that really understand a lot of what's going on. And I do get a lot of what's going on right now. I've seen the tweets and some of the comments, replies underneath more popular tweets, people saying, well, actually, you have to look at Jenna Ortega and Barry Keoghan as metaphorical characters or characters who aren't actually there that represent both sides of his emotions. And then you look at what he's going through, losing his voice as his psychological experience. Like, I understand all that. I don't have that relationship with the artist on a personal level like a lot of people do. So to me, it was seeing all of that play out, maybe putting some of the puzzle pieces together, but ultimately not really feeling anything because of how long and drawn out this story is. I mean, it is such a, I don't want to use the word repetitive, but just a tedious story to where you understand what he is trying to tell us. And losing your voice as an artist, when someone is going through that, of that level of notoriety, yeah, I understand why you'd want to write something about that. But I don't know if a 2-hour movie was the best idea. I would understand a music video or a short film or, something to coincide with the album release. But this product was I've never watched a movie that I know has something to say to someone, but for me, I felt nothing. You know what I mean? Like, I'm watching it, and there's just this level of emptiness that I can't describe. And I'm watching top-tier talent. Like, I think Jenna Ortega, even though maybe her projects haven't been the best as of late, I see a lot of people giving her flack over that. She's in her early 20s. Let her have her fun. She can pick Oscar-caliber projects later. But I'm watching her in this film, and there are literal scenes where she's going back and forth with The Weeknd, and he's really over the top and going for it. She's not saying anything, and I'm sitting here going, man, Jenna Ortega is a really good performer. What's he doing? And I do think there's something there as an actor, but I look at Shults as a director and the people that he's bouncing off of, and it's just not really holding a candle. Like Barry Keoghan's role in this film, while he doesn't supply much from a character perspective, he gives a really nice performance, but I just wasn't really feeling it from The Weeknd, and I wasn't really feeling it from his character. Like, he's kind of not a good dude. And I understand this is not actually him. He's playing a character in a movie, but he comes across as someone who maybe isn't, a little tiny bit insufferable in this film. And I don't know if he's doing that on purpose, but this is the second project in which he has played a similar type of character. So I'm like, what are we doing? But I'm going through the plot in my head. I'm just like, all right, concert, and loses his voice. He's going through some things. We meet Jenna Ortega's character. Like, we meet her a little earlier, but she finally becomes prominent in the movie. And then some weird stuff goes down. I'm not going to mention it because it's a spoiler. And the movie ends. And I'm just like, was that it? There's nothing. There's nothing to it. It is a cavern. I walk in and my voice is echoing off the walls because the room's completely empty. There's nothing there. And I'm just trying to latch on to something like character. And for fans, they're going to be able to latch on to The Weeknd. And those who know his story, they will probably appreciate it because of that. But even then, I look at the plot of this movie, or lack thereof, and I'm thinking, was this worth all of the money and the artistry put in? Like, at least you've got phenomenal top-tier visuals. And there's actually a warning before this movie starts, like there's going to be flashing lights, and there are scenes that feel like psychological breakdown, what his character is going through. And those moments were actually really interesting. But what surrounds that and where we go, where this inevitably leads, I kept waiting on something to happen to get this plot going, and nothing really ever happens. Like, they never inject that level of magic that you expect from an A24 type of film. And this isn't A24, but it has that look, and the trailer had that feel. And I feel like that's what he wanted in his head from this. But if you don't have the script, then it's not going to come together. I think of a really good friend I have. He just can't stand sitting through like really overly artistic movies like this. But most of the time I'm like, well, at least it has a message. It has something to say. This one doesn't have much to say unless you're in that bubble. And that's why I'm trying to be as fair as possible, because I know if you're a fan of someone or an actor or even a character, like, you're always going to have that connection that maybe isn't able to translate to other people. Like, they're not able to understand why I love the early 2000s Scooby-Doo movies, why I love Mike Myers' Cat in the Hat, that I acknowledge is terrible, because I have a special connection to it that I can't describe. And I understand it on a different wavelength than everyone else. And I feel like that's how some fans are going to be with this movie. And that's cool. But for others, anyone outside of that bubble, you may appreciate the artistry. I don't know if you're going to be able to latch on to anything else in this film, because there's just an emptiness to it. It's so much inside baseball and a lot of, that's it? Or a lot of, all right, can we move on to the actual story here, and a lot of Jenna Ortega dancing. I love dancing to something that makes me miserable. Stay on the bed! And again, you kind of care what's happening to him, but it's hard to care about him because of how unlikable his character ultimately is. So, for me, Hurry Up Tomorrow is not what I hoped it would be. It has that level of artistry, but beyond that, there's not much. It's one that shows but doesn't tell. Lots of style, little substance. And it's so hard to describe because I was the only person in that theater. I'm looking around going, I don't even know, why am I here? Thank God my ticket was free. Thank God. Cinemark Movie Club. Thank you. So I'm usually pretty positive. Maybe next week's movies. Leave your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, sharing this video, leaving your comments, leaving those likes. What else? Showing your grandma? Does she care about The Weeknd? What fans could describe as a can't-miss fever dream ultimately doesn't expand beyond that bubble and fails to attract those who are blissfully unaware. There's a lot to like visually, but anything beyond that could only be described as an empty misfire. Too much inside baseball, and not enough to appeal to anyone looking for an interesting story. Again, I'm curious to see, like, is there something I missed? I'm looking at the possibilities of Jenna Ortega, Barry Keoghan, not actually being there. Maybe it was just his mind the entire time. Like, so many things about this that could make sense. But even then, was it worth an hour and 45 minutes? Was it worth, a hardcore Weeknd fan taking their girlfriend who isn't a Weeknd fan, which could ultimately result in the worst date night ever for one of those people, and then the best for the other. But actually do that. If anyone does that, let me know on Twitter. All right. Thanks for watching.